In the early 1990s, when Milwaukee slept behind locked doors and half-drawn curtains, one man walked among the crowds unnoticed. Jeffrey Lionel Dahmer, a quiet figure with soft eyes, a gentle way of speaking, and a darkness so deep even seasoned detectives later struggled to understand it. Born in 1960, Dahmer wasn't the explosive type. No shouting, no theatrics, just an unsettling calm, like he lived behind a pane of glass the rest of the world couldn't see through. His neighbors barely noticed him. The guy who kept to himself. The one who offered a shy smile in the hallway. But inside apartment 213, he created a universe of controls, obsession, and horror. A place where reality bent toward his compulsions and no one truly knew what happened past that yellow door. For years, police crossed paths with Dahmer without realizing who they were dealing with. Victims escaped, reporting bizarre stories. Yet somehow he slipped back into anonymity, hiding behind that same soft voice and carefully rehearsed politeness. He blended into the noise of the city like a ghost with a pulse. But on a humid night in 1991, a handcuffed man sprinted into the street. The facade cracked, and when officers stepped inside that apartment, the air itself felt wrong. Photographs, tools, carefully arranged remains, each object whispering the truth Dahmer never spoke out loud. The calm exterior was gone. His own words later painted the picture. He wasn't driven by rage, but by a need to freeze time and keep people from leaving him. Dahmer didn't run. He didn't fight. He simply sat in the interview room and unraveled the story of a double life with chilling detail. The city, the country, the world stared in disbelief. How had someone so invisible walked among them for so long? Jeffrey Dahmer is more than a headline. He's the reminder that monsters don't always roar. Some whisper politely while hiding their world in plain sight. The moment the tape recorder clicked on, Jeffrey Dahmer didn't hesitate. He didn't ask for a lawyer. He didn't ask what the charges were. He simply lowered his eyes and began speaking. Calmly, clearly, as if the words had been waiting for years. He confessed immediately. He told detectives he had planned his encounters. He told them he had selected men he thought were vulnerable, isolated, or simply willing to trust a quiet stranger. He explained how he would approach them with offers of money, drinks, or a place to relax. There was no anger in his voice, just a plain, steady recounting of events that left the room silent, except for the hum of the fluorescent lights. Detectives asked him why he kept bringing people back to his home. His answer came without emotion. He didn't want them to leave. He spoke openly about his obsession with control, not in a violent, chaotic sense, but in a deeply psychological way. He said he feared abandonment more than anything. He feared people disappearing from his life the moment he let them out the door. So he tried to prevent them from leaving at all. He admitted he wanted individuals who would stay exactly where he placed them, who wouldn't reject him, who wouldn't walk away once the night was over. As detectives pushed for details, Dahmer described the pattern that shaped his crimes. He met someone, he brought them home, and once they were inside, he was terrified the moment of companionship would end. He said the silence of his life felt unbearable. He said the idea of waking up alone the next morning was worse. So every time someone tried to leave, every time a conversation drifted, or the night wound down, that old fear returned. The fear that the loneliness he'd lived with since his teens would swallow him whole again. He admitted that the crimes themselves weren't driven by rage or impulse. They were driven by a twisted need to stop time, to freeze a moment of connection and keep it from disappearing. Detectives listened as he calmly mapped out years of encounters. He remembered names, streets, bars, bus stops. He remembered the clothes people wore, the music playing, the time of night. He remembered the parts that made him feel less alone, the conversations, the laughter, the brief companionship. And every time he reached the point where those moments would normally end, he acted to stop them ending. He told the detectives in the same quiet voice that he knew what he was doing was wrong. He knew it from the very beginning. He said he wasn't driven by thrill or hatred. He said he acted because he felt empty, disconnected, terrified that no one would ever stay. Throughout the confession, detectives noted how rarely he lifted his head, how he spoke like someone describing a routine, how he didn't try to shock them or soften the truth, how he didn't cry, raise his voice, or attempt to justify what he'd done. He simply told them what happened. Step by step, victim by victim, year by year. And as the hours passed, the detectives realized they weren't listening to a man trying to escape responsibility. They were listening to a man who had finally run out of places to hide, someone whose entire world had been built around avoiding abandonment, and who was now facing the ultimate form of it: complete isolation. By the time he finished talking, the tape recorder had filled reels of audio. Detectives had pages of notes, and the weight of the confession, its detail, its clarity, its chilling calmness, left the room silent. For the first time in over a decade, Dahmer no longer had control, and he didn't fight that fact. He accepted it, quietly, completely, as if the confession itself was the only honest thing he had left to give. Inside that interrogation room, Jeffrey Dahmer finally began to explain what he had done. He admitted to taking the lives of 17 young men and boys between 1978 and 1991. His method was chillingly calculated. Dahmer said he targeted people who were vulnerable or alone, luring them back to his apartment with offers of money, alcohol, or companionship. Once inside, he incapacitated them. He told detectives that he wanted complete control over his victims, and that he hated the idea of anyone leaving him. During questioning, Dahmer described one of the most disturbing details of his pattern. He began drilling small holes into his victims' skulls while they were unconscious, attempting to create what he called a zombie-like state. He injected chemicals into the cavities, hoping they would stay alive but completely passive. These attempts never worked. Detectives said Dahmer explained all of this with an eerie calmness. No emotion, no hesitation, as if he was describing routine tasks. By the end of the interview, investigators understood the full scale of his crimes. 17 murders, carried out over more than a decade, all hidden behind the walls of his Milwaukee apartment. After Jeffrey Dahmer's arrest, investigators uncovered a long list of failures that had allowed him to keep killing for years. One of the most shocking moments came from an event in May 1991, when a 14-year-old boy, Konorak Synthesophone, escaped Dahmer's apartment, drugged and disoriented. Two women tried to help him and called police. But when officers arrived, Dahmer managed to convince them that Konorak was an adult boyfriend who had simply had too much to drink. Despite the boy's obvious injuries, the officers accepted Dahmer's explanation. They returned Konorak to the apartment, unaware that Dahmer had already targeted him. This tragedy became one of the most heavily criticized failures in modern policing. As the case moved toward trial, Dahmer's crimes captured nationwide attention. In early 1992, he was charged with multiple counts of murder committed between 1978 and 1991. Dahmer pleaded guilty, but not guilty by reason of insanity. His lawyers claimed he suffered from severe psychological disturbances. Prosecutors argued the opposite, that Dahmer planned his crimes, understood right from wrong, and carried out each step with clear intent. After hearing weeks of testimony from mental health experts, detectives, and victims' families, the jury rejected the insanity defense. Dahmer was found legally sane and fully responsible. He received life imprisonment plus 999 years, ensuring he would never be released. Inside Wisconsin's Columbia Correctional Institution, Dahmer initially stayed in protective isolation, but was eventually moved into the general population. While imprisoned, he took on cleaning duties, read constantly, and spent long periods discussing religion. He participated in televised interviews, speaking calmly about his crimes and expressing a belief that prison was the only place he deserved to be. His interviews with Inside Edition and MSNBC drew huge audiences due to his emotionless, matter-of-fact tone. Dahmer also maintained contact with his parents. His father, Lionel Dahmer, visited regularly, searching for answers about his son's behavior. His mother, Joy, wrote letters and remained in contact despite the horror surrounding the case. Their relationship with Jeffrey in prison was distant, but continued until his death. Over time, Dahmer developed a dark sense of humor that angered inmates, making disturbing jokes and acting in ways that many saw as taunting. Prison staff noted rising tension around him, despite attempts to monitor his safety. On November 28, 1994, that tension erupted. Dahmer was assigned to a small work detail with two other inmates, Jesse Anderson and Christopher Scarver. The three were left unsupervised while cleaning a prison area. Scarver attacked both men with a metal bar taken from exercise equipment. Dahmer received fatal injuries and was pronounced dead shortly afterward. He was 34 years old. Scarver later stated that he believed Dahmer had mocked him and that he felt compelled to act. Others suggested the crime stemmed from resentment over Dahmer's notoriety and the nature of his offenses. Regardless of motive, the incident exposed major security failures inside the prison. Jeffrey Dahmer's death brought mixed reactions across the country. Some saw it as justice. Others believed he should have lived out his full sentence. For the families of victims, it marked the end of a man who had taken so much, but not the end of the pain he left behind. Jeffrey Dahmer's story remains one of the darkest chapters in American criminal history. Not just because of his actions, but because of the failures that allowed him to continue for so long. His life became a disturbing mix of isolation, obsession, and opportunity, shaped by personal struggles and missed warnings at every stage. In the end, his crimes forced police departments, psychologists, and entire communities to confront uncomfortable questions about mental health, vulnerability, and the limits of the justice system. His trial, his time in prison, and his eventual death all became part of a case that continues to be studied to this day. For many, the legacy of this story is not about the man himself, but about the victims, the families affected, and the lessons learned. It's a reminder of why vigilance, accountability, and awareness matter, because when they fail, the consequences can echo for decades. This has been the story of Jeffrey Dahmer, a case that continues to challenge, disturb, and teach us even now. And remember, the world is full of people living behind closed doors, hiding their true intentions. So the next time you're at a bar, on a bus, or sitting on a late-night train, ask yourself one chilling question. Who's really sitting beside you?